A Night Inside the Great Pyramid. Initiatory Experiences Inside the King's Chamber. In 1935, Paul Brunton, the well-known spiritual authority and writer who first alerted the wider world to Ramana Maharshi in his best-selling A Search in Secret India, was granted a very rare permission to spend a night alone in the Great Pyramid. What he experienced during those solitary hours included an initiatory near-death experience and much more. The following excerpt from his book, A Search in Secret Egypt, is his account of these life-changing events. I was beginning one of the strangest activities of my life, albeit a silent one. I had proposed to myself to spend an entire night inside the Great Pyramid, to sit awake and alert for 12 hours in the king's chamber while the slow darkness moved across the African world. "We are taking a risk in leaving you alone inside all night. You won't blow up the pyramid, will you?" said a Major Mackersy humorously as we shook hands in parting. "I am afraid we shall have to lock you in," he added. "We always shut the entrance to the pyramid at dusk with a locked iron grill, so you will be a prisoner for 12 hours. I entered the silent pyramid through the gaping hole which Caliph al-Mamun had made in its side. After exploring the lower chambers, I eventually reached the most important room in the pyramid, the famous King's Chamber. A dislodged flooring block offered a possible seat, so I sat down on it, tailor-like, with folded feet, and settled there for the remainder of the night. On my right I had placed my hat, jacket, and shoes. On my left reposed a still-burning torch, a thermos flask with hot tea, a couple of bottles of iced water, a notebook, and my Parker pen. A last look around the chamber, a final glimpse of the marble coffer beside me, and then I extinguished the light. The sudden plunge into total darkness brought with it the wondering question of what the night would bring forth. The only thing one could do in this strange position was to wait, and wait, and wait. The minutes slowly dragged themselves along, the while I slowly sensed that the king's chamber possessed a very strong atmosphere of its own. A strange feeling that I was not alone began to creep insidiously over me. Yet nothing clear-cut, definite, emerged from this vague and general sense of an eerie life that pulsated through the darkness. There was something throbbing and alive in my vicinity, although I could still see absolutely nothing. The great space of the king's chamber became, for me, who had investigated deeply into the psychic, into the mysteries of the occult, into the sorceries and wizardries of the Orient, peopled with unseen beings, with spirits who guarded this age-old building. I know only that as I tuned in by a method of interiorized attention which I had learnt long before this second visit to Egypt, I became aware that hostile forces had invaded the chamber. Shadows began to flit to and fro in the shadowless room. Gradually, these took more definite shape, and malevolent countenances appeared suddenly quite close to my own face. Then a dark apparition advanced, looked at me with fixed, sinister regard, and raised its hands in a gesture of menace, as though seeking to inspire me with awe. Age-old spirits seemed to have crept out of the neighboring necropolis, a necropolis so old that mummies had crumbled away inside their stone sarcophagi. The shades that clung to them made their unwelcome ascent to the place of my vigil. Although these phantom forms that moved across the room began by stirring in me a sense of alarm, they ended by provoking me to summon whatever reserves of courage and combativeness I could muster. A circle of antagonistic beings surrounded me. It would have been easy to end it all by switching on the light, or by leaping up and dashing out of the chamber and running back a few hundred feet to the locked grill entrance, where the armed guard would have provided gregarious comfort. Yet something inside me intimated just as implacably that I must see this thing through. At last the climax came. Monstrous elemental creations, evil horrors of the underworld, forms of grotesque, insane, uncouth, and fiendish aspect gathered around me and afflicted me with unimaginable repulsion. The end came with startling suddenness. The malevolent, ghostly invaders disappeared into the obscurity whence they had emerged, into the shadowy realm of the departed, taking with them their trail of noxious horrors. I do not know how long a period elapsed before I became conscious of a new presence in the chamber, of someone friendly and benevolent, who stood at the entrance and looked down upon me with kindly eyes. With his arrival, the atmosphere changed completely, and changed for the better. He approached my stony seat, and I saw that he was followed by another figure. Both halted at my side, and regarded me with grave looks, pregnant with prophetic meaning. I felt that some momentous hour of my life was at hand. Withal, they wore the unmistakable regalia of their office, high priests of an ancient Egyptian cult. Indeed, they looked more than men, bearing the bright mien of demigods. They stood motionless as statues, regarding me, their hands crossed upon their breasts, remaining absolutely silent. Their tall figures bent forward. The lips of one spirit seemed to move, his face close to mine, his eyes flashing spiritual fire, and his voice sounding in my ear. "Why dost thou come to this place, seeking to evoke the secret powers? Are not mortal ways enough for thee?" I did not hear these words with any physical ear. Certainly no sound vibration disturbed the silence of the chamber. Really, the voice which came to me might be termed a mental voice, because it was surely heard within my head, but that might give the wrong impression that it was a mere thought. Nothing could be farther from the truth. It was a voice. And I answered, "They are not." And he said, "Go back." But I answered again, "No, that cannot be." Still he strove once more. "The way of dream will draw thee far from the fold of reason. Some have gone upon it and come back mad. Turn now, while there is yet time, and follow the path appointed for mortal feet." But I shook my head and muttered, "I must follow this way. There is none other for me now." Then the priestly figure stepped forward closer and bent down again to where I sat. I saw his aged face outlined by the surrounding darkness. He whispered against my ear, "He who gains touch with us loses kin with the world. Art thou able to walk alone?" I replied, "I do not know." "So be it. Thou hast chosen. Abide by thy choice, for there is now no recall. Farewell." And he was gone. I was left alone with the other spirit, who so far had only played the part of a silent witness.
"My son, the mighty lords of the secret powers have taken thee into their hands. Thou art to be led into the hall of learning tonight,"
he explained dispassionately.
"Stretch thyself out upon this stone. In olden days it would have been within that yonder, upon a bed of papyrus reeds."
And he pointed to the coffin-like sarcophagus. It did not occur to me to do other than obey my mysterious visitant. I laid myself flat upon my back. What happened immediately afterward is still not very clear to me. My entire body became heavy and numb. First, my feet became colder and colder. The feeling developed into a kind of iciness, which moved by imperceptible degrees up my legs, reached the knees, whence it continued its mounting journey. I appeared next to pass into a semi-somnolent condition, and a mysterious intimation of approaching death crept into my mind. It did not trouble me, however, for I had long ago liberated myself from the ancient fear of death and arrived at a philosophic acceptance of its inevitability. I felt myself sinking inward in consciousness to some central point within my brain, while my breathing became weaker and weaker. When the chill reached my chest and the rest of my body was completely paralyzed, something like a heart attack supervened, but it passed quickly, and I knew that the supreme crisis was not far off. I was quite sure that all my sensations were due to the passage of my own spirit from physical life to the regions beyond death. At last, my concentrated consciousness lay in the head alone, and there was a final mad whirl within my brain. I had the sensation of being caught up in a tropical whirlwind and seemed to pass upward through a narrow hole. Then there was a momentary dread of being launched in infinite space. I leapt into the unknown, and I was free. No other word will express the delightful sense of liberation which then became mine. I had changed into a mental being, a creature of thought and feeling, yet without the clogging handicap of the heavy flesh body in which I had been shut up. I had gone ghost-like, clean out of my earthly body, like a dead man rising out of his tomb, but had certainly gone into no sort of unconsciousness. My sense of existence, in fact, was intensely more vivid than before. Above all, with this exodus to a higher dimension, I felt free, blissfully, languorously free in this fourth dimension to which I had penetrated. I gazed down upon the deserted body of flesh and bone, which was lying prone and motionless on the stone block. I knew at last why those wise Egyptians of old had given in their hieroglyphs the pictured symbol of the bird to man's soul form. I had experienced a sense of increased height and breadth, a spreading out just as though I had a pair of wings. As I gazed down at the cold stone block upon which my body lay, a single idea obtained recognition in my mind. This is the state of death. Now I know that I am a soul, that I can exist apart from the body. As I regarded those unseeing, unresponsive eyes, the irony of the whole situation struck me forcibly. My earthly body had really imprisoned me, the real me. But now I was free. I had been born hither and thither upon this planet by an organism which I had long confused with my real central self. Suddenly, by my side, appeared the old priest, grave and imperturbable. With upturned eyes, his face more ennobled still, with reverent mood, he prayed.
O Amun, who art in heaven, turn thy face upon the dead body of thy Son, and make him well in the spirit world. It is finished.
And then he addressed me.
Thou hast now learned the great lesson. Man, whose soul was born out of the undying, can never really die. Set down this truth in words known to men. Know, my son, that in this ancient fane lies the lost record of the early races of man, and of the covenant which they made with their Creator through the first of his great prophets. Know, too, that chosen men were brought here of old, to be shown this covenant that they might return to their fellows and keep the great secret alive. Take back with thee the warning that when men forsake their Creator and look on their fellows with hate, as with the princes of Atlantis, in whose time this pyramid was built, they are destroyed by the weight of their own iniquity, even as the people of Atlantis were destroyed.
There surged up in me a great desire to see this mysterious covenant, and the Spirit must have read my thought, for he quickly said,
To all things there is an hour. Not yet, my son, not yet. No man of thy people hath yet been permitted to behold such a thing. But because thou art a man versed in these things, and hast come among us bearing goodwill and understanding in thy heart, some satisfaction thou shalt have. Come with me.
And then a strange thing happened. I seemed to fall into a kind of semi-coma. My consciousness was momentarily blotted out, and the next thing I knew was that I had been transported to another place. The high priest bade me follow him a little way down the passage.
Look not backward,
He warned me.
nor turn thy head.
We passed some distance down the incline, and I saw a large temple-like chamber opening out of the farthest end. I knew perfectly well that I was inside or below the pyramid, but I had never seen such a passage or chamber before. Evidently, they were secret and had defied discovery. I could not help feeling tremendously excited about this startling find, and an equally tremendous curiosity seized me as to where and what the entrance was. Finally, I had to turn my head and take a swift look backward at what I hoped was the secret door. I had entered the place by no visible entrance, but at the farther end I saw that what should have been an opening was closed with square blocks and apparently cemented. I found myself gazing at a blank wall, then as swiftly whirled away by some irresistible force until the whole scene was blotted out, and I had floated off into space again. I heard the words,
Not yet, not yet.
repeated as in an echo, and a few moments later I saw my inert, unconscious body lying on the stone.
It matters not whether thou discoverest the door or not. Find but the secret passage within the mind that will lead thee to the hidden chamber within thine own soul, and thou shalt have found something worthy indeed. The mystery of the Great Pyramid is the mystery of thine own self. The secret chambers and ancient records are all contained in thine own nature. The lesson of the pyramid is that man must turn inward, must venture to the unknown center of his being to find his soul, even as he must venture to the unknown depths of this fane to find its profoundest secret. Farewell.
My mind whirled into some vortex that caught me. I slipped helplessly, sucked downward, ever downward. Heavy torpor overcame me, and I seemed to melt back into my physical body. I strained my will, pushing and trying to move its rigid muscles, but failed, and finally I swooned. I opened my eyes with a shock in inky blackness. When the numbness passed, my hands groped for the torch and switched the light on. I was back in the king's chamber. When the armed police guard unlocked the iron grille soon after dawn, a dusty, weary, tired-eyed figure stumbled out of the Great Pyramid's dark entrance. He made his way down the large square blocks of stone into the early morning sunlight and gazed, with eyes that blinked, at the flat, familiar landscape. His first act was to take several deep breaths, one after the other. Then he instinctively turned his face upward towards Ra, the sun, and silently thanked him for this blessed gift of light to mankind. 11 years later, in 1946, Paul Brunton again received special permission to spend further nights in the Great Pyramid. In his unpublished writings, available in the Cornell University Library, he recorded that the king's chamber was indeed an initiation room. The message that was transmitted to him included the following:
The forces here which once opposed you will now help you. From now on, your life will be changed in every detail, spiritually and materially.
He wrote that from then henceforth he would live in full surrender to divine hands, the higher will, which had now taken charge of his life. He went on to write 10 best-selling books on spirituality, translated into over 20 languages. A Search in Secret Egypt is available in deluxe and paperback editions from www.larsonpublications.com. Some other popular titles by Paul Brunton. Please subscribe to the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation channel. www.paulbrunton.org www.pbarchives.org